and welcome to another video episode of Crow Jam. This is the podcast where two sisters and an occasional guest have 1 hour to develop and pitch an original board game concept. I'm Miriam. I'm joined, as always, by the queen of trick or treats, my sister Georgia.
It's me.
It's her. Can confirm. It's not just me on a different microphone. And we are also joined by my lovely friend Felix.
Howdy, how's it going?
Felix, would you mind telling our listener a little bit about yourself and maybe about like what kind of games you like to play?
Yeah, of course. Hello, listener. So I think unsurprisingly, I'm a bit of a nerd. I like a lot of stuff I like to play tends to be kind of like a bit asymmetric, kind of like, but also quite. I like kind of big system games often enough. Where because I'm a I did physics as a degree. I'm now a computer scientist, software engineer. So and a lot
when you
of my
mentioned
interest,
you were a nerd, I was like, yeah, I can tell by the angle that your camera's at on Zoom. It's like that's a real second monitor camera right there.
oh, red for filth.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Like that is right there. Optimization. Also you couldn't see like the stack of textbooks that's next to it. Yeah, like I mean, like, but yeah, like, oh yeah. So like a lot of my stuff is, I saw like a lot of my gaming. I started early doing like Warhammer and the Games Workshop stuff, so I really enjoyed the idea of like lots of moving parts and sort of having to manage it and sort of juggle multiple plates at the same time. That's often quite something I enjoy. I suppose what might be quite relevant is I have ADHD. So like often the kind of games that I enjoy are the ones which are very stimulating, have a lot of different things moving around, but don't become too repetitive, right? So things which are kind of challenging, a little bit unbalanced, keep me on my toes. They're often really fun for me. Like really like to, get my teeth into and like grapple with that kind of stuff.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, good, awesome. Georgia, what is the what was the little thing that the little crow had in its mouth in your picture?
Oh, it was meant to be like a little exclamation mark, but it's not the best.
Oh, I see. Okay, I was like, is that an eyeball on a stick? That
yeah, he's eating an eyeball on a stick.
Look, I have to admit, I got more like you went that dark. I went like olive. I thought he was having a martini or something.
Oh, a little martini crow.
Anyway, what we do on this here podcast, or specifically on the video episodes, is usually our guest brings a 1-word prompt as the like jumping off point for our brainstorming. Felix, what is the prompt that you brought us?
All right. So prompt I went with was tribes.
And what was what were your sort of initial thoughts about that?
So, like I said, like I kind of like thinking around sort of systems and groups and working together. As a lot of my job is often about, bringing people and working together. But it's also something you see a lot. Like I said, I have ADHD, and in the neurodiversity community, it's often something that pops up. So it was the idea of the neuro tribe. I think it's an interesting word for me because it could mean a few different things. You've got those groups of people who are like, yeah, we're all the same. It's sort of, it can be a family, but it can also just be like everyone is one of a type.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a very good thing, right? It can be a place of belonging. It can be a place of values and nurture, but it can also be sometimes hostile, exclusionary, right? A little bit like, ooh, we don't want you here. But there's a flip side to it, which is the idea of, the found family, the village that raises a child, which isn't everyone the same. It's the diverse group. And actually that can be equally a tribe, right? That probably the understanding of social dynamics is often it's better to have a mix of people, not everyone the same. And so like that was the thing I was playing with, and I really liked the idea of thinking about. And I was thinking, is there a game that you could build that is about understanding difference and celebrating it, and sort of like something that could help? It's almost like is there a game around building empathy and understanding and enabling each other?
Wow, I don't know that we're going to create like world peace. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Right? It's like that's a lot to put in. That's like a holy grail.
Yeah. But those are all really interesting themes. And honestly, like I think that depending on what kind of game we want to create, I think that those are elements that would probably lead towards a lot of the games that me and Georgia quite like to create. In the more sort of like team-based or more communicative or like slightly more party game end of the spectrum, maybe.
Yeah.
But then again, like we have talked about you liking like kind of more complex, more more crunchy games. So Georgia, like did you have any thoughts on this prompt or theme?
My main thought was that I felt like it's been a little while since we designed a game that was played in teams. And I was thinking this in relation to recently watched a review of Phantom Inc., which is a sort of teams party game, and I've also watched a review of you can tell I've been watching a lot of Shut Up and Sit Down. I watched a review of the War of the Ring card game, which also you have the option to play that as teams. So I was thinking that it might be fun to make a game where there's, a team element. What about you? Did you have any thoughts?
I had some things that came to mind first, but I think maybe the things that feel most relevant to the conversation right now, I was wondering about a team game, and I was wondering about something that might kind of combine like a herd mentality style game and a wavelength style game, something where it would be like you, based on a question for that like section of the game, you end up divided into sort of 3 groups depending on whether you're like at one end of the spectrum, the other end of the spectrum, or whether you like are in the middle or like take longer to decide. And I don't know if Georgia I know knows wavelength, but I was wondering about something about that, and potentially that could be kind of interesting, like if you wanted to get into like deeper questions of how people experience, like workspaces or social situations. Like it could be more specific.
Sure.
Yeah, I do like games that are about the different ways that people think. I think I also wanted to slightly kind of flag something up when I saw that tribes was going to be the prompt, which is just that this is not a word that's without baggage, right? Like it's like I would be more interested in leaning into the kind of the neuro tribes idea in the way of like, different communities of people who maybe think more alike versus some of the, especially in board gaming, which does have a little bit of a history with kind of like uncritically reproducing colonialist ideas.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. That's really important. Yeah.
It's obviously not the kind of thing that we would generally do, but it is the kind of thing we would generally flag.
Speaking of flag, the other thing that I have written down in my little notes, and which I guess could end up relating to the sort of games we're talking about, is like something with flags or emblems. I don't know exactly what I was thinking about, but it just struck me as fun that maybe there could be some kind of game that includes, kind of like, God damn it, what's the ology that's flags?
Vexillology.
Vexillology and like heraldry and like the sort of symbology of like declaring like families and groups, and whether there could be some sort of like kind of creative or like sort of interactive game that includes something about that.
I really like that, but what I maybe like that as would be like it's a team-based game where maybe your first task is to create your team's flag or crest.
Yeah.
So I think that would be really fun. I mean, I like the idea that maybe it could evolve as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, those were my thoughts.
Yeah, no, so yeah, like it's really like the idea of evolving is an interesting one actually, because one of the things obviously is things can change, right? And like actually often what united people at some points can be something either it stops being as appealing or it can divide them. Like, conditions can change. Your family can change, I think.
Oh, so maybe it's a team-based game where you can change teams.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So that's this this is tricky.
So I want to explore a little bit further the idea of a crunchier game with systems. Like, because I mean, I think generally I do lean towards lighter games, more sort of party oriented things. For a start, I think they can be a bit of an easy route on the podcast. It's easier to describe a game where you have to communicate with dance than a game where you have to describe the 3 different types of victory track.
Yeah, okay.
But I think I generally shy away from games that are a bit more complex, and maybe I'd like to to push that a little bit more, to try for something a bit crunchier.
Yeah.
So
there are only so many party games we can make.
Well, we haven't found the upper limit yet. But Felix, do you have a favorite sort of slightly more heavyweight game?
Oh, that's a hard choice, right? Played Viticulture recently, very much enjoyed that. I think that has a certain appeal to my sort of work background as well. But like the idea of something with flow, Viticulture.
Oh yeah.
You know it.
I do know it.
Yeah. Yeah. Some games where I think it's a bit like Agricola, right? That idea of task management, sort of getting things done, but finding the balance of producing more versus getting things done. That's quite a common theme for me.
Yeah.
It's I'll tell you what, task management and
getting really things. Dull when you say like that. It's like
well, I was kind of thinking a bit about like sort of having talked about your own like diagnosed neurodiversity. It's not like let's say I'm not a person with a diagnosis, but I'm a person who sees some characteristics in myself. And you know what? Task management and getting things done, that's like a challenge that I deal with every day.
Exactly. Yeah, maybe this is why I like the idea of doing it, because I actually get to do it for once, right? Maybe it's simulating the things I struggle with in life.
Kind of appeals, but it did kind of make me think, like, what about an idea that was kind of about like your focus as a resource or something like that. Like actually being able to dedicate sort of in-game resource to something in a way that symbolizes your ability to be engaged with something or get something done.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the executive function, right?
Yeah.
Like how many spoons do you have in a day? How do you spend them?
Yeah. How would it be possible to make that into a competitive game? That I guess what's the question that I'm asking? A competitive game that's not excessively like sort of soloist, if you know what I mean. Like people talk about a competitive game, but where you're mostly only kind of doing your own thing.
So this is my big beef with Wingspan. Like that I could be playing a game of Wingspan and basically not interact with another person. And I can see it's a beautiful, elegant puzzle, but it's not really what I'm interested in. So
if you're sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I think if you're leaning on the idea of focus and on sort of the demands for time and resource, one of the things that is very interesting about when you're interacting, and I've got family who have ADHD, I've got family who have Asperger's, so, know plenty of people with mental health, various mental health difficulties. And often it's not so much about you, but it's about what society puts on you and asks of you, right? So actually there is a almost automatic interaction if you're talking about this kind of stuff, because it's about what other people ask of you to do, not just about what you want to do yourself.
So are we thinking that if we made this into a competitive game, it would be not only a case of managing the tasks on your own plate, but there would be like a built-in demand that you are required to place on other people in order to get your stuff done, kind of like a weirdly almost like competitive office job or something like that, where it's like, well, I've got to stay on top of all this stuff that I've got to do, but also I just need so and so to finish those freaking reports.
So I had a kind of idea
I'm
about
starting
this.
the timer, by the way.
But I can't decide if I like this idea or if I actually think it's kind of like problematic. Kind of like a one versus many asymmetrical game where the one just wants to complete a simple task and the many want to do a lot of other things. So that feeling of having to like wrangle your energy and attention and your ability to do anything towards a task that is a non-preferred task. But I don't. I feel
so
like
each player in this scenario is representing sort of a different kind of
potentially. I don't know. I feel like I actually want to slam the brakes on that idea, because I feel like it will end up being kind of overly simplistic and not really achieve what I would want to achieve with a game about being different.
Yeah. Could you bring in something a bit more team-based though? Like bringing it back to that idea of finding common cause and finding a group of people around you. Could it be sometimes you got to ask sometimes you have to ask something from other people. That's not a bad thing, but about finding a balance maybe?
I really like that expression, common cause. I think I've maybe pitched something like this on the podcast before, but a team-based game where you don't know who you're in a team with. So maybe you have like you might even be in multiple teams with multiple people where you have a few common objectives.
Like a hidden role sort of a thing going on.
Yeah, somewhere between a hidden role game and like a sort of Euro game, sort of resource management type game, where there's maybe like two types of victory track that would represent victory for you, but then everyone's got like slightly different victory conditions, but you would win as a team. So like anyone who had the such and such anyone who had most sheep as a win condition wins if you get the sheep engine online. But there's multiple engines, multiple
the
demands.
Sheep shed then?
Yeah. So it would.
Are we sheep sharers in this situation?
I'm remembering. What's the zombie game? Something Winter, Dead of Winter.
Yes.
Has that? That has like a trade mechanic, doesn't it? But it's got like multiple different like objectives you've got.
But there could be a sort of, not exactly a traitor mechanic, but there could be like, I don't know, let's say there's like it's like a point salad type game, and there's 5 different places where you could score points, and you can win on like team type conditions, but there's also one secret win condition that someone has that's like selfish, and that's kind of like somewhat symbolic of self-sabotage. But I feel like I don't want this to be about not being able to concentrate on something so much as being abstracted away from that in some way. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does.
The idea makes think so. To try and talk through, I guess, what I'm imagining, it would be like on the surface, if you weren't looking behind anyone's screen or whatever, it would sort of have the functions of kind of like a cooperative game, in the sense that the things that you all do kind of like work with common, you have like common resource pools or common like engines that are shared.
I describe it as like semi-cooperative, but not everyone can win. So you're playing, it's exactly as you say, Miriam, like you're playing it as if it's a cooperative game, but each of you has a pair of possible win conditions, a pair of a type of thing that would score you double points at the end, let's say. And then, but you don't know who else also has that on their card. So you'll be like collaborating with some people and not with others. And because you'd have, but you wouldn't know, if you see
so
what
it's not like you win as a team if the like sheep team threshold of sheep is met. It's more like everybody does have their individual score, but it's based on a combination of different elements.
Yes.
So there is only one winner who has the highest score in most.
Oh, see, I was seeing that there would be a team victory at the end. I just don't know exactly how that would be expressed. But yeah, what I was seeing is like everyone would play it as if it was a cooperative game, but knowing that they had private objectives. But you would share your private objective with at least one other person. But you just don't know who that is. But you could lie about it.
So in that scenario, it's not necessarily points based. It's just
trying to get to a particular.
You need this card. What it says on. So in theory, everyone could meet one objective if they're not like all about the exact same thing.
Yeah, so you'd probably need like
it's
a
like
tiebreakery thing, maybe.
Or it could be like, I mean, a game that maybe does this to some extent is the like Ankh-Morpork Discworld game, in the sense that you can share some elements of your goal with what somebody else wants, right? And then, but the way that you win if you're Chrysophase is if as soon as you get 50 coins, like that, or like at the end of your turn you have 50 coins, that's, you say that you can win. Does what I'm saying make sense?
Yes, it does. The other thing that I was kind of thinking about, and the thing that slightly prompted this jump off for me, was the idea that you might not exactly shift teams, but the reason why you would have multiple possible objectives is that you might say, let's say the three of us are playing a game and I have one objective in common with each of you. Like Felix might start to collect sheep, and I look at my card and I'm like, oh, I've got, having like 20 sheep on the board is a win condition for me. I'll start working towards that. And then at the same time, Miriam is like spinning wool, and I have a look and I think, actually, she's spinning wool pretty quickly and I only need 5 wool to be on the winning team. So I'm shifting over to wool production.
And I'm just like, both these suckers are making sheep for my wool machine.
So like the things that one player might be doing might like feed into, like when a Euro game is really working and you're spinning up like a system. So it would and we would be communicating and being pretty straightforward, like, oh well, I'm gonna place a sheep this turn, we want to produce jumpers, like that's our overall objective. But secretly, your objective is like sheep oriented and Miriam's objective is wool oriented, and jumpers even though we're all talking about jumpers because we think someone might have a jumpers objective, it's actually not relevant to any of us.
I think we need.
Love about... Go on.
No, you go.
So I was going to say, what I love about this idea is that it's actually just playing off real social dynamics, right? Of like, I've got a thing I want to achieve, you've got a thing you want to achieve. I don't want to tell you what it is, but we're going to kind of work something out and hope that it's about right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hate to point out the obvious flaw in the sheep wool jumpers. But you truly cannot make jumpers without wool, nor wool without sheep. So
yes, but what you're forgetting is you can't make sheep without jumpers.
They get cold.
Yes, you're right. It's precisely.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking of exactly that. Something more interconnected than linear. But I was trying to give an example that was, simple enough that I could explain it off the dome.
No, I know. I mean, I definitely got that. I'm just wondering how easy it would be to come up with those things unless we went quite abstract.
Well, you know what? I was sort of thinking, would it be interesting? I'll tell you what, it wouldn't be interesting for making a podcast. But would it be interesting? Like, I've never seen a Euro game that doesn't really have a theme. So, it's very game. Like agricultural, industrial, trains. And what if it was just like
the three types of Euro
cylinders,
games.
Pink,
I sort of I do sort of enjoy that, and it means that the kind of like process chains themselves could be quite abstract as well. Like, it wouldn't necessarily need to be that spheres can always become discs, or cylinders can always become, I don't know, hollow cylinders. Just, it could be like even the way that those chains happen could be sort of randomized.
Yeah, or you could have like reciprocal ones, like it's as easy to turn a cylinder into a sphere as it is to turn a sphere into a cylinder, but you need 3 pyramids to make a cube. Like,
I guess a game which sort of has this, and I would hesitate to call it a Euro game, mostly because I don't know what that means.
It doesn't mean anything.
Gizmos, which I played a little while ago, has a little, like your resources are just like red, blue, yellow, or black marbles, and your gizmos are like very abstract as well. But it definitely didn't have this kind of like hidden objective style situation. I think that's quite fun. You're right that it's not very interesting to make a podcast on.
But in a way, I feel like there's kind of an interesting challenge to it. So when I think about this kind of crunchy engine building, I say Eurogame, and I know what I mean by that, but as I've said before in the podcast, all it really means is a game with a points track around the outside of the board. But like, what I think about is like, your early turns are pretty slow, and you're kind of like, oh, I can take 1 cube or 1 cylinder, but at some point you get to trade in a certain number of your cylinders for an upgrade on the cylinder track that means now whenever you take 1 cylinder you take 2 cubes. And so on.
Like you say, building the engine. Yeah, sorry, go
on. Go, you talk, Felix.
I was just agreeing with thing. You go.
So yeah, I feel like you could start having systems like that work for everyone, so everyone can choose how to spend their resource, and maybe you start with like a particular affinity for a certain kind of resource, or like a power that everyone could start with a sort of modifier where it's like, oh, anytime you take a cylinder, take 1 extra cylinder, so that encourages you to spec into cylinders early. But that doesn't necessarily mean that on your secret objective having loads of cylinders on the board might not be good for you. So you kind of have to collab with people That's kind of the direction I was thinking. So it would be kind of like I guess the fiction would be it's a factory that makes completely generic objects.
Sorry, Georgia. A completely generic object is a green, slightly beveled cube.
Oh yeah, God, what is that from?
I'm not telling you. It's a Homestuck thing.
I think I did know that. I mean, we're allowed one Homestuck reference on this podcast per year, so
we're probably well over.
Yeah, I think we probably are. But to be fair, not all of them are intentional.
I like this. Basically, it's becoming a theme of we are a factory making generic game parts.
Oh my God! Yes, that is what we are. We're a factory that manufactures game parts. And like the most complicated type of game part we make is a meeple. So that would be, you'd need several different types of part to manufacture a little guy. But then once you do manufacture a little guy, that's like a production multiplier because he starts working in the factory.
That's pretty good.
Oh my God. Little meeple running around making other meeples.
Tom Thumb board game edition.
Oh God.
Okay, yes, I like that. The question I want to ask is, do we think that there would be some kind of like veneer of central cooperation? Like, would there be some kind of thing that we are collectively trying to do? Or
yes. I think there should be a shared objective, but I don't think it's the case that, if you achieve the shared objective, maybe it could be this. If you achieve the shared objective before any one person achieves their private objective, team victory.
Okay.
So it's a little bit of a prisoner's dilemma.
And maybe, maybe that's what I guess if you find yourself in like a disadvantageous position for your private thing, then you can be pushing for the shared thing. And to some extent, it's in everyone's interest to go for the shared thing. So that kind of gives you a better chance.
Yeah. I think that works.
So maybe there's like
gives you a nice catch-up mechanic as well. Sorry, go on.
No, you talk, Felix. We've both been talking about.
I was just saying, like, it gives you, like, actually, it's a nice thing because it gives you a nice catch-up mechanic, which actually is something that a lot of Euro games do struggle from, right? It's like, oh, this person's won by gay round 2, or by like have a card on the first like setup fell.
Yeah.
So I like, the fact that you could be like, oh, that person's clearly winning. Well, we're going to move towards this one now, and like, you've kind of got to contribute. Or
I think that maybe it would be that there's just kind of like a set output that we have to meet in order to win together. It would just, it might be randomized, or it might be just like a preset thing where it's like, well, we need to have made 4 meeples and 6 hexagonal tiles.
You could do like you could do a game, what is it that I'm trying to say, like, completely spaced, sorry. So you could do like a difficulty modifier by having them as like KPIs, key performance indicators, for those of us who have managers. And so you could have like,
I regret to inform you, I have a manager, but I don't think KPI.
He's not the kind of guy who would set a KPI.
You have key performance indicators there, or
board games taught. Coffee's made.
You
got to get these numbers up. These are rookie numbers.
To be fair, that is kind of the vibe.
So you do have KPIs, they just haven't been properly communicated.
No, they've been communicated. Sell more games, sell more memberships, sell more beer.
So you could like for a 1 level difficulty game, you just have one objective, produce be producing 4 meeples per turn, for example. So like get the engine online to the point where it's spitting out X meeples per turn, or you could have, you know, like you could then add additional modifiers to make it more difficult. Or you could just have like different difficulty levels. So, you know, it's like you win the game when you produce 4, or you win the game when you produce 8 different types of component, or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Now, this is the part that I'm dreading slightly, but I think we might need to get into a little bit of how does it work?
Yes, okay. I do agree that I have been dreading it.
Because I sort of feel like I like to imagine that yeah, like some of the kind of like the production steps would be things that would like maybe come through during the game. Like maybe there's cards in a deck that tell you like, okay, like two cylinders can become one tile, or that kind of thing.
Okay, so those could be like, in another type of game you might call those recipes, right? And you could unlock them.
Maybe, do we want to make this more kooky and abstract, where it's like, okay, cylinders can become cubes, anything can become anything? Or do we want to make it a bit more concrete in the like maybe there's like 3 types of material that come in? You know, it would be like wood, paperboard, and molded plastic. And those can be different things.
I have an opinion on this, but I'm not going to express it straight away. I want to ask what you guys think.
I like the kookier version more, I think. But I do feel like it's going to be slightly trickier for us to actually pass out on the podcast. That's what about you, Felix?
I also agree. I think I do like the idea of just arbitrary game objects turning to other arbitrary game objects. But yeah, it's I don't know.
What about you?
I also like the most abstract version, and I think we can pass it out on the podcast. I think we can talk it through, even though it's probably not going to be our most scintillating audio yet. But I think it could. So your idea, Miriam, about there maybe being a deck of cards that would maybe show a particular production recipe is what would make that work. So you would have kind of like basic systems that would come online that would allow you to produce different shapes. So I guess you would have probably what I would call like simple shapes, medium shapes, complex shapes, and then like perhaps one maximally complex shape that, if we're sticking with the board game manufacture theme, is maybe a completed board game. And would look like a little box. So what I think would happen would be that everyone would start out with some kind of ability that gives them an affinity with one of the simple shapes, and they can start to do things that spin up the production of simple shapes. And then at some point, through some combination of action, you unlock your first recipe or system, and you socket that into the board. So it's a card, and you just put it in a set location, and that card now says cube plus pyramid equals a more complex shape, a mid-complexity shape. So now people can start to move things along that particular shapes tracker. So every time you produce one of those, you can either choose to add it to the supply, or you can spend it to improve your efficiency at making that type of shape. And again, you're sort of unlocking different types of recipe, and then there are probably then like set ways of making more complex things, and the eventual goal is, you know, make 4 meeples or make one completed board game. But you're
building
sort
up
of
a chain.
It's a sort of production chains type thing, but it's got this element of randomization that means that you're not always doing the same thing every time. And crucially, your win condition could be to do with the production of a simple shape, or it could be to do with the production of a mid-complexity shape, but one that doesn't come up very much and isn't that relevant for the type of production chain that your system is doing. So, do you run the risk of then pursuing that, because that will expose you as probably trying to pursue an individual victory and tip other people off? Or do you just work towards the collaborative victory? And it is likely that you share a victory condition with at least one other person.
Yeah.
I wonder whether maybe every round or every turn or something, there would be kind of like a resource in step. Maybe this would be a separate deck where it kind of tells you like, this is how much stuff you've got, and perhaps you have to choose, like maybe as a group, like, okay, do we want this amount of stuff to be like 6 cubes, or do we want it to be like 2 hexagons and a cylinder?
I don't know what you guys would think of this, but how about this? At the start of the turn, you face up 3 cards, which each represent a shipment of like raw materials, basic shapes. And then maybe you privately vote on which shipment the factory accepts.
Okay.
So there's like a secret voting mechanic of some kind, where everyone picks, shipment 1, shipment 2, or shipment 3. And then that way people can either try and pursue, again, the set goals of the factory towards the shared victory, or they can try and get the raw materials that are going to contribute to their private thing.
I think that's cool, and I think that works.
I really like your idea, Miriam, like of having the goods in being a bit randomized. So then you kind of have to make do with the odd things you've been given. And I also think you could get, thinking about these recipes, like I described one where it was kind of like thing 1 plus thing 2 equals thing 3. But I think you could also get one that just lets you like freely change thing 1 into thing 2.
Yeah, you
and, like,
definitely want
and vice versa, like conversion.
Trading. Yeah.
And maybe, like, so those could be abilities that you gain as individuals. So that would make it more of a co-op game.
Yeah, sort of like there are some individual abilities, and then the ones that get socketed into the board might be like more
almost like processes.
Yeah, and ones like as a rule they'd probably be more ones that are like specifically related to achieving the group objective, or like like putting them in the board would basically have them be in your factory, kind of like they're like plant, right? They're like they're your processes, they're your like special machines, and then you also have like personal abilities, which I guess would be like your factory job, like I'm a sphere cuber, like
I think the fact of it, like, again, like having individuals being able to do particular things well, and I think the idea of them being able to benefit from people using their ability. And so it can either be, are we doing this for the good of the group, or is it benefiting them individually? And maybe it's a bit of both.
I like that brings the tribes back in a little bit more. Because I do like, I have been aware that we've drifted away from that a little bit, but I don't think we've abandoned it completely.
No, definitely.
What do we think about having a mechanism by which you could use someone else's ability? Like, I'm not sure how you would do that, but maybe it would be something like you could pay someone an amount of resource, and in exchange you would get to use their ability that turn or something. Does that make it more competitive and less cooperative?
I think
but it's kind of a hybrid.
Sense, but I don't know. I guess like I'd like to voice that I don't know if that's necessary. Like I don't know that I don't think it would make it too complicated, but like at least in the way I'm imagining this game, somebody using their ability to like change 4 cubes into 4 spheres, they do that, but the things that they've made are still all in the like shared resource pool. Like I don't
so they
picture
would
anybody having like private stuff that they're working with.
so there's just kind of a big central like bucket of stuff.
Not necessarily bucket of stuff, but
I've already drawn a bucket.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's an interesting one. Like how, like I guess that's the question of what are those objectives going to look like if it's just we've got a shared pool of stuff and then someone wants to achieve something themselves.
Okay,
how do you benefit? How do you drive that?
I do have some possible thoughts about this because Miriam is right. It shouldn't be for the actual like shared resources that are being produced in the factory. You should have, I think, a pretty clearly defined like resource track, which shows where you are in the production process with it. You know, does the action produce 1, 2, 5? That kind of classic like increasing production mechanic. And then there should also be kind of a set place where all the cubes or all the pyramids live on the board and people can choose to use them and spend them. But the idea of the bucket does have some appeal. So here's what I'm thinking. Imagine, if you will, that I am a sphere cuber and I decide on my turn to take 4 spheres out of the supply and replace them with 4 cubes. Now, instead of those spheres being destroyed, what if they go in the bucket? And there's like a sort of a reject bin in the factory that anyone could draw from, but there's some kind of either there's like a gameplay penalty or there's a social penalty where everyone kind of sees like, oh, you're drawing from the bin, huh? Like you're not working towards our shared objective.
Well, I mean, I suppose that you could justify drawing from the shared bin. Like, this game could end up with a scenario where it's like you just don't have the process you need to like advance the shared objective. At least I think that's possible.
Yeah, I think that's definitely possible.
Yeah. I think I agree that it should probably be, if you're going to do that, it should be a cost, right?
Yeah,
be, like,
I think I think it would be something like drawing from the bin uses your whole turn or something. So you don't get to do anything that improves the state of the factory. You just gain some resource that is in, not in high supply. And maybe it goes in front of you instead of going in the general supply or something. And it's still like available to be used, but people know that it was you that dug it out of the bin rather than producing it on the production line.
I enjoy that for the kind of like social element. Like
so thinking about personal objectives, like the team objective would be to do with like producing an item of sufficient complexity, right? It's like moving through all the levels of factory complexity and eventually producing something that required an amount of teamwork to get there.
Yeah.
But the individual objectives are about number of particular shapes in play. So if you're one of the people who has spheres as your victory condition and you see a load of spheres go to the bin because someone cubed them, you're going to like, that's going to set you back. But you could still be like, oh, well, we're going to need spheres later, so I'm just going to take a few out of the bin, but they'll be in front of you. So the other sphere players might know that you are also trying to get that. But then other people might also...
Do you think that perhaps if somebody's drawing from the bin, maybe there's some way that like all of the other players have some control over how many things they get to take from the bin, if that makes sense? Like maybe it's another like voting situation where it's like you just vote yes or no and that person gets to take. Does that make sense? Like if like 2 people vote yes and 1 votes no, then you only get to take 2.
Yeah, I think that is quite good. Yeah, because then there's this additional thing of, so you would say something like, oh, on my turn, I think that we're going to need cubes, so I'm going to retrieve some cubes from the bin, and then just everyone puts their token in a bag, the bag gets shaken up, and then you get as many cubes as positive votes.
Yeah, going really deep on the theming, it's like just like how many people are prepared to turn a blind eye to you doing a slightly subpar job.
Yeah, and how many people can you convince that you're acting in their interest too?
And in some cases, you will be acting in their interest, right? Because there will be some people where there being visible cubes in play is contributing to their victory. So I think we definitely have a vote bag is a component. I might take a second to quickly talk about the various things that I think this game has, and you guys can kind of sense check what I say as I go. So I think this game has a large central board. And that large central board is probably divided up into a few sections that kind of represent, raw materials in, early processing, like more complex processing, and then maybe like finishing. And within there's kind of little individual tracks and bins and, all the stuff that goes into one of those complicated type of games. I think this game has loads and loads of different types of shapes. Probably like you could do shapes and colors so that, you're always basically, so you don't have to come up with a load of new 3D solid shapes.
Yeah, you're not completely overwhelmed. Yeah.
I think this game has a deck of private objectives, which will have multiple objectives shared between players, but those are private. I think this game will have a deck of public objectives, which is like, a type of thing made, or a collective win condition. I think this game has a deck of raw materials in cards. I think it has a voting bag. I think every player has voting tokens for firstly for voting on what type of raw material goes in, and then also for voting on whether someone gets to dig in the bin or not. And I think this game has a bin.
A literal bin.
You didn't even mention at least two other, or at least one other deck of cards, which is like the processes.
Oh, yep.
Quite a lot of stuff, but hey, that's Eurogaming.
We said we were going to make a crunchy game. So yeah, various decks of cards. Times 3.
So just on the time check, we have 23 minutes on the clock. I feel like, it makes sense to me. I quite like what we've come up with, even if it's nothing like what I initially imagined, but that do be what the podcast is.
Do we want to, I don't know if we need to do this in great detail, but would one of you guys like to describe what you think happens in a turn, and then the others of us kind of sense check it or ask questions?
Yeah.
Felix, do you feel up to that, or is that an insane thing to ask a guest on the podcast to do?
I reckon I can run through, like, I can definitely run through options. I don't know, like,
right? Let's see how our understanding all maps up.
Yeah. So think like what are the actions that you can basically take within the turn, right? So you can effectively build a new process or maybe play a new process. You can use that process to convert tokens into different tokens. You can fish around in the bin.
Yes.
I'm not sure. I feel like, we've got like supply delivery, but maybe that should be like shipments on a regular cadence rather than being like a turn action you choose to do.
Yeah, I think that would be what starts the turn. So like the very first thing that happened in the turn would be a group vote on which shipment of raw materials to take.
Yeah.
Yes.
So perhaps this may be a question where we want to decide, like, does each person get only one action on their turn, or are there like action points that you can spend on, like, changing processes in the factory, using processes? Is using processes free? Are your own processes free and ones in the factory cost actions, or vice versa?
Ooh, these are all really interesting questions. I think I like the idea of action points. And I definitely like the idea that you should be able to do your own action or an action that belongs to you as a free action. And then maybe you pay action points depending on like the complexity of the task you want to do. So you could do a 1 difficulty thing 3 times, or a 3 difficulty thing 1 time for a cost of 3. Would there be methods by which you could get more action points? So could you discard resources for an additional action point or something like that?
I feel like that should itself maybe be a process. Like, that could be something you could look at.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah,
maybe
that's how.
And I think this makes me think that maybe gaining additional processes is something that you would maybe have like a face-up like shop of 3 that you could choose to purchase instead of taking actions. So you could spend your action points 1 turn, you could spend your action points gaining a new free action or something like that. So that it would be like better for the system later at a slight cost to productivity now.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You build another meeple kind of mechanic, but not meeples, because apparently we're building. I don't know. Are we building meeples? Or
I think we are building meeples.
Okay.
This has made me realize that we slightly lost that silly idea we had that once you built a meeple, you sort of gained an additional ability because he was helping you. But I think that probably is too silly.
Well, maybe making a meeple, you can.
Go.
You could, I guess, you could like if this was balanced into the game, you could have it so that you can take a meeple and just have them next to you, and they are giving you like an additional action point on a turn or something.
Yeah. So it might be like at the expense of the team's overall objective, like straight away. You know, if you're trying to build 4 meeples and one of them is working for you, but on the other hand, if he helps you build the next 4 quicker, kind of thing. I think without us needing to get too deeply into the systems of how that works, I think that could potentially work. So
yeah,
I feel like we obviously untested, unrigorously thought through, but it does feel like we've got a crunchy game here that does a few kind of weird things that I like. So really quickly, I think we've talked about this a fair bit, but I just want to run this by you. So there are 2 ways that the game could end. The first one would be that a private objective belonging to 1 or more players is reached. That player or those players notice and call it. So it would be at the end of someone's turn, everyone would check, has one of my win conditions been met? And if it has, then they would kind of say like, stop production, I win. And the victory would be shared between any players that had that objective.
I've just considered the fiction within which you kind of have like a down low.
Yeah, like you've been selling cubes on the black market.
That's it. Steering, we're pulling out and we're taking our stuff with us.
Or alternatively, the big game objective is met and everyone wins, and it's a shared victory. So those are the 2 ways in which victory might be achieved. Is there a scenario under which everyone loses? So no one achieves their personal victory and also the production is a failure. Do we have like a turn limit, for example?
I've got to assume yes, unless you wanted because in a game where it's going badly on all fronts, you don't want it to last forever.
Yes. And I think like balancing that with like having too few turns would really incentivize like selfish play, right? Like,
yeah.
we're never going to reach the team objective, so I'll focus on my solo objective. So I think we don't have to hash it out because this isn't something we're really making or playtesting, but I feel like yes, a number of turns, the number is not too low.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It could alternatively be one of those things where you know, like if one or two of any resource runs out, then the game ends or something.
Oh
like,
yeah, that's quite good.
I don't know how they would run out. I guess like if they all end up in the bin.
yeah, I think
Wow.
that's potentially a good. Yeah, if there's like 3 resources all in the bin or something like that, like it would have to be something that it was reasonable to keep track of, if you know what I mean. I suppose if you have the resources in kind of silos, like they're all in their separate little containers, when a certain number of those containers are empty, even if they're still in circulation, if there's no more to come in, like if you can't fulfill the conditions of a shipment of raw material.
Maybe. There's another one which maybe what if you limited the amount of supply coming in, and then at some point you can't make any more moves? Like, what if there's an element of a system has stopped because you've been fighting over it too much?
Oh, that's a good. Yeah, I can get on that. Or that you could also have, when you're voting on which shipment to take, there could also be a refuse all shipments option, and maybe if that wins, like if that gets a straight majority, that could also end the game.
Who would be voting for that though?
Oh yeah, good question. Okay. Maybe if
I think so. Gone.
No, I was just gonna say like an additional thing, which I don't think helps.
I think that like lack of supply would probably be.
Yeah, I think that's the neatest. When a certain number of supplies are depleted.
Yeah. I think if you could refuse supplies as well, and like there's a short-term advantage maybe to some people, but actually you still lose that. Like it's not like, oh, we've delayed it. It's like, no, it's gone.
Yeah.
That could really reinforce that, right? So
I was wondering if there was a vote, like a majority vote to refuse any of the shipments, you could get like a random one off the top of the deck. But that's I don't know if that's like good or, well, I mean, I guess the whole point is you don't know if it's good or bad. But like,
I'm sorry to be that guy, but
we're running out of time.
Yeah.
Okay, what's it called?
Not fully running out, but I just wanted like not let us like get in the weeds on smaller stuff. We usually talk a bit about like what we think the game would look like, and then we spend some time in silence and umming trying to come up with a good title.
I think the game really, really looks like a very generic, like the parts are all perfectly generic because that's kind of the point of
I'm
them.
sort of imagining like a Euro game layout, like very like you described, but I'm kind of imagining the aesthetic being quite like concept, the like very like white background, like colored cubes and like symbology and stuff. That's sort of the vibe I'm imagining.
That's incredibly clean, right?
Yeah.
So yes, I totally agree. And the all the pieces are just really, it's this highly simple, stylized. I think the processes would be represented almost diagrammatically. It's just lines and arrows. And yeah, the idea is that this is the factory that makes the games that have all the fiddly little pieces, and all the heavy theming, but the factory itself is like perfectly generic.
Yeah, I think that kind of sums it up for me. Like I like the idea that it's just as like excessively sort of complex looking as those Euro games. Like which as Quinn says, have you looked at some of this stuff? Sometimes I think we should all be in prison.
Yeah.
But instead of being like, you know, all having like a, you know, like a heavy Victorian aesthetic or whatever, it's just kind of yeah. So yes, name, what's it called?
I have put on the screen share Euro Game Factory, Gamufacture, and Perfectory.
Yes, I like all these names. Is there could we do something that includes a little bit more of the element of sort of like subterfuge and
Yeah.
I like
like
these names though.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
Oh, it's not really about unionizing, is it? Like I've been sort of wondering the whole time, like, is there sort of a like a secret union narrative to this? But it's really not. It's more like embezzling.
it kind of can be though, right? That's the thing. You can do like the former union, but it's like, does someone like do you all? I think it goes back to prisoner's dilemma. Do you all collaborate, or does someone defect? Can you trust everyone? How do you know you can trust everyone? It's like, yeah, I don't know.
No, I think
Good.
yeah, like there's prisoner's dilemma, there's trust, there's like embezzlement.
Something with meeple.
Yeah, you realize what we're talking about here is game theory, by the way.
Yes. Oh, game theory. Unfortunately, there are a lot of things already called game theory.
I'm sure, yeah.
But I'm putting it on there anyway because I quite like it. Miriam, what did you just say? Because I liked it and then I forgot it.
Something about meeples, like
it would be like meeple resources.
Oh,
actually, that's really good.
Because it is about like resources, but it's like also like a business thing.
But also, it's got that weird, and that kind of slightly toxic culture thing as well. Yeah.
Like I don't want to and ah too much.
Yeah.
If looking at what's on the board, what do I like? I like Eurogame Factory, I like Meeple Resources, and I like Game Theory.
Yeah, I think those are the three for me. Maybe it's just Eurogame Factory.
I feel like I could make such a fun thumbnail for that. Like it would take like 2 seconds because it would just be like grey Helvetica on a white background. You know, like just
you spend no money whatsoever on your marketing, would you? On your branding.
I don't know if it's perfect. So I'm definitely open to discussing it a bit more because it doesn't describe like the subterfuge, the like secret teams and stuff. Is like meeples at work.
Yeah, I think the meeple point does really appeal,
like I don't know. I feel like I just keep coming back to Eurogame Factory because I think it's quite a funny name for a Euro game. But then I don't know how like widely accepted Eurogame is. Like obviously it's used somewhat in the hobby, but like what other words are there for those? Like, what do people call them? Like hobby games.
Also, does our game count as a Euro game? Like, I know that
it's got resource tracks.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess it doesn't need to be a Euro game. It just needs to be a
game. It's a game about making Euro games. Is there something with like?
I do worry that might still be like something people wouldn't get. It's a bit maybe a joke.
Something with component
parts.
Component parts isn't bad.
Some of the parts, more than some of the parts.
Ooh.
Foreign parts.
Parts unknown.
Private parts.
Unknown
Assembly
component.
required. I think that's actually a thing already. Hell is other.
Hell is other meeples. That feels like a tagline for a different game.
I like unknown components. What if it was just component? Like, it's kind of like a little bit of opponent, but
yeah, it's a little bit like comrade and a little bit like opponent. I actually really like that. Like, I would happily call it component or unknown components, but kind of styled how I have there, where like the unknown and the S are different from the word component, which would be the kind of focus. I think that might be the one that I like best. Like, but I don't know if I just prefer just component though. So is there a prevailing opinion between you guys?
I feel like component is more elegant, but actually unknown components will like maybe work better kind of communicating
what it actually is.
Yeah.
Is unknown component, I feel like, I know what you mean. I feel like is unknown components a phrase that I'm just not quite.
No, I don't really think it is, but it kind of is like, it sounds like one kind of thing.
Yeah.
Something like that. I'm happy to workshop it a little more.
I mean, we have come up with names after the fact before.
That's true.
But I like component being the
kind of meat of it.
I really like
that. It's a little bit like just being called concept as well.
Yeah. And I do like that we've gone for this like highly generic branding idea. So I do kind of like the idea that the name would just be like just the word component on a white box.
Yeah.
The cleanest design you've ever seen.
It could have like one like sort of like faked like cutaway corner as though you're looking into the box and you can see like one segment of the inlay with the bits in.
Ooh, I like that. So yeah, like I do feel like we've really kind of come up with something here. Like,
yeah, I wouldn't have thought it, but that is kind of how it goes. But yeah, we made sort of a crunchy game that has like hidden objectives and also is sort of abstract while still being themed way.
So I'm going to do a really quick recap. In this episode, Felix invited us to jam on the theme of tribes. We talked a little bit about what that can mean. We talked about what ideas we might want to steer away from, and we leaned towards an idea about having things in common or a common cause with people, even if you don't necessarily know what it was. We also talked about wanting to pursue making a game that was a little bit more sort of middleweight to heavyweight, not in our usual kind of range. And sort of by working together, we came up with the idea for a semi-collaborative factory-themed game where you try to automate a factory that makes board game components, where there is a team victory condition and a team loss condition, but there are also private victory conditions. And it's got this kind of various shifting systems that are to do with upgrading your production methods and learning new ways of making things, and trying to maybe subtly achieve your private objectives while also seeming to be contributing to the team objective. The overall look of this thing is highly simplistic and elegant, and we have named it Component. Is there anything important that I missed in my recap?
I don't
No, I
think
think
so.
that's spot on.
Nice
All right.
one.
I'm hitting pause with 1 minute 9 seconds to go. Nailed it. Came in right on time. Yeah, this was great. I as always quite enamored with the idea that we came up with.
Yeah, no, I was actually I was not where I expected to go either.
No.
But
But that's kind of how it works. Like, you don't ever make what you think you're gonna make. Is there anything that you would like our one listener to know about?
No, we're not gonna get no.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Listener,
I'm
you're
not
off the
very
hook this
social,
week.
So
Just don't forget to read up on, I don't know.
yeah, go learn about
On-
university. Absolutely, let's go with that. Like, go learn about people and how different people work. That's a good one.
So thank you, listener, for tuning in. Thanks so much to Felix for coming along.
Thank you, Miriam, for hosting.
That was really fun.
And yeah, come back next time for more Crow Jam. Caw-caw!
Caw-caw!